being Moses' brother, who served as the first priest. Every priest who came after that must be from the tribe of Levi and is then called a priest in the order of, or from the line of Aaron. And so what we see from the book of Hebrews is that Jesus is set apart from that. Because Jesus is not a priest from the line of Aaron. As you know, Jesus didn't come from the tribe of Levi. Jesus came from the tribe of Judah. What the book of Hebrews shows us is that Jesus is different. Jesus is not like all of those Old Testament priests, all of those Israelite priests, but Jesus is different. He is set apart. He is superior. Why? Because he comes in the order of Melchizedek. Read with me the end of Hebrews chapter 6. We have this, verse 19, as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him. And to him Abraham apportioned a tenth part of everything. He is first, by translation of his name, King of Righteousness, and then he is also King of Salem, that is, King of Peace. He is without father or mother or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life. But resembling the Son of God, he continues a priest forever. See how great this man was, to whom Abraham the patriarch gave a tenth of the spoils. And those descendants of Levi, who receive the priestly office, have a commandment in the law to take tithes from the people, that is, from their brothers, though these also are descended from Abraham. But this man who does not have his descent from them received tithes from Abraham and blessed him who had the promises. It is beyond dispute that the inferior is blessed by the superior. In the case of tithes, in the one case, tithes are received by mortal men, but in the other case, by one of whom it is testified that he lives. One might even say that Levi himself, who receives tithes, paid tithes through Abraham, for he was still in the loins of his ancestors when Melchizedek met him. So, as I said, what the Hebrews writer is showing his audience, a Jewish audience that had a deep root in an understanding of old Israelite priests, of what God expected from his Israelite priests, that they would be in the line of Aaron, that they would come from the tribe of Levi. What he is showing here in the book of Hebrews is that Jesus is set apart from that Jesus is greater. He wasn't a priest in the order of Aaron. He was a priest in the line, in the order of Melchizedek. And so, because Melchizedek had been the one who blessed Abraham, what we see is that Melchizedek is superior. Read with me again, Hebrews chapter 7, verses 6 and 7. Next slide, please, guys. Hebrews chapter 7, verses 6 and 7. We may have to read that from our Bibles. He says, "But this man who does not have his descent from them received tithes from Abraham and blessed him who had the promises. It is beyond dispute that the inferior is blessed by the superior." So the Hebrews writer is pointing back to the book of Genesis. And he is saying, in essence, remember when Abraham came to this guy Melchizedek, and when Melchizedek blessed Abraham, and then Abraham gave him a tenth of everything that he had. That shows us that Melchizedek was superior to Abraham. Melchizedek was superior to Abraham. Why? Because what the Hebrews writer says, verse 7, it is beyond dispute that the inferior is blessed by the superior. So in essence, what the Hebrews writer is saying is this Melchizedek, the guy who you don't hear that much about, this Melchizedek was superior to Abraham. He was superior to the father of the Israelite religion, to the Jewish religion. And why is that important? Because what we see in Hebrews chapter 7, verses 1 through 3, is that Jesus is a representation of Melchizedek. Melchizedek is a representation of Jesus, rather. That those two are comparable with one another. If you see back at the beginning of chapter 7, he says that Melchizedek, king of Salem, was, verse 2, a king of righteousness. That he was a king of peace. That he is without father or mother or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor the end of life. But listen to this, resembling the Son of God, he continues as a priest forever. So what the Hebrews writer is saying is this Melchizedek guy, he is a representation of Jesus. And if Jesus is a representation of Melchizedek or vice versa, and Melchizedek is greater than Abraham, then Jesus serves as the greatest high priest imaginable. So then the question I have for you tonight is this: why does that matter? Why does the Hebrews writer go through this complicated process of explaining to us who this Melchizedek guy was and that Jesus is superior and that he is the great high priest? Why does that matter to the gospel? Why does that matter to these original readers? Well, I want you to put yourselves in the shoes of the audience that this letter was written to. As you know, as we've talked about, Lance talked about it a little bit this morning, that this letter was written to a group of struggling Christians. We know that. We've talked about that many times. This was written to a struggling group of Christians, but a struggling group of Jewish Christians. And so they understood this whole idea of a priest, that a priest was a representation or a representative before God for the people, that he went before God on their behalf. And so ultimately, as the writer goes on throughout the next couple of chapters, throughout chapters 7, 8, 9, and 10, what he is telling is that Jesus is the great high priest. And in doing so, his message is clear. What the Hebrews writer wants his audience and us in turn to understand is that there is hope in the fact that even though Jesus isn't on this earth anymore, he is still at work in heaven. Jesus serves as our great high priest, meaning that he is eternally our representative before God. You see, for this group of people, they understood priests to be these men who went before God on their behalf. These were the people who they could trust in to sacrifice on their behalf. These were the people who they could trust in to go before God and plead on their behalf. They trusted in their priests. Maybe even more than people trust in their ministers today, because these priests had direct access to God that the normal people didn't have. And so he's writing to this audience, an audience who was struggling, an audience who had likely either seen Jesus and his work on this earth or knew people who had seen Jesus and his work on this earth. And what he is telling them is that even though Jesus isn't here anymore, even though he's not on this earth and you're not able to see his miracles and you're not able to hear his teachings, Jesus Christ is still at work in heaven. Even though